The numbers, sigils, graphs, and reports continue to flow and flicker across the cogitator's screen, which remains stubbornly blurred despite your meticulous efforts to keep it clean. It's strange, considering how diligently you maintain it. But who cares, your shift is almost over, and soon this will be the next operator's headache. The volume of information is staggering. A ceaseless flood of statistics and metrics that you and your peers in the dim windowless control bay are charged with managing. It's important. You are important. Without you and those beside you, who else will maintain and monitor the sewerage and waste systems aboard the Master's vessel? As the final minutes of your shift ebb away and you begin idly scratching at the scab surrounding your lidless eyes, you allow yourself a moment to recognize the uncelebrated significance of your role. It's a thankless task, but gratitude was never your fuel. You know the Masters value your service. You've seen proof of it. The moment is burned into your memory. The day when a Master looked right at you. His most blessed gaze, piercing through those sacred red lenses, reached into your very soul. There was acknowledgement in that glance that seemed to last a lifetime. Gratitude, understanding, respect. The next operator is already in place behind you, ready to continue this most sacred duty. As you stand and offer a nod of acknowledgement, his clouded distant gaze and frail body barely register your presence. He simply slumps onto the stool and leans in to start his watch, a long drawn-out, almost painful sigh escaping from his lips. You shrug off the silent exchange and head towards the exit just as the shift change alarm begins to blare. As the seal of the control room door hisses closed behind you, you step forward into one of the ship's maintenance arterials, a bustling space alive with the pulse of countless souls. The air, recycled 1,000 times over, still carries a scent of engine oil and the acrid tang of sweat and urine. In the space before you, children duel and skirmish with scavenged metal, their laughter clashing with the muted barter of hooded merchants peddling relics of questionable sanctity. Marked members of the faith score sacred runes and symbols into the cold metal of the deck and bulkheads, their murmurs a soft litany against the backdrop of the muttering afflicted, who wander aimlessly or talk as shadows in the less travelled recesses of the passage. As you make your way into the space, you glance fleetingly at Antius's dimly lit stall, feeling the weight of his leering gaze like a physical touch. Quietly you vow to settle your debts with him by the next cycle, knowing all too well his reputation for exacting harsh penalties, even from those who claim the Master's protection. Suddenly, you realize something changed. Yes, silence has fallen completely upon the space as you approached its midpoint. The vibrant chaos of the arterial has been replaced by a sudden, eerie stillness. Serfs, labourers, menials, merchants, and the faithful, men, women, and children, all have frozen, their expressions mixed. Some prostrate themselves, others bow their heads in fearful reverence, while a scant few scatter like vermin down small, shadowy passageways, their sudden movements a sharp contrast to the paralysis of the crowds. Then you notice it. The Masters, in their infinite wisdom, have deigned to walk amongst their lesser. From the great door of morning, the Masters have emerged. How did you miss it? You freeze in position, averting your gaze from those stationed so far above you. One of the Masters, three emerge from the great gate and pace towards the teeming throngs of supplicants. The stuttering lumens above cast dancing shadows across the pitted surfaces of their most sacred armour, throwing the true scale and array of their grand arsenal into stark relief. Within you, your awe and reverence battle with the primal, deeply human urge to flee from an alpha predator, to disappear into the safety of the unwashed masses around you. But to show fear before the Masters is to admit guilt or to show weakness. To stand firm, however, That is to honor the masters and to show them the iron of your being and the strength of your resolve. Yet, despite your determination to stand tall, the overwhelming presence of the approaching masters compels you to kneel. You fall quickly to the cold plasteel deck, bowing your head as you whisper ancient oaths of fealty and faith to the Iron Lords of war and wisdom. Your fingers trace the blessed marks upon your temples, and you find a measure of comfort in performing this sacred tradition. But even with your eyes averted, you still sense the penetrating gaze of the Master sweeping over you, anointing you with the silent benediction of his regard. Faced with the weight and potential of this moment, you slowly raise your head, your eyes rising to meet those approaching crimson lenses. The crowds have parted in the Master's wake like shadows from a flame. Alone now, you kneel before them. They continue to approach. Whispers from the shadows seem to say that you have been chosen. They are right, of course. You are chosen. Alone among the teeming masses of the lower decks, finally you have been chosen. The iron of your will has finally been recognized. Oh, what glories await you at the Master's side. They are mere steps away now. You battle with yourself to remain firm in the face of such a presence. As much as you wish to see the jealous gaze of Antaeus in the shadow of his lowly stall, to avert your eyes now would be to ruin this moment, this long-awaited recognition. The masters are finally upon you. The leading master, resplendent and supreme in his crested martial panoply, does not slow as he bears down upon you. He is colossal, eternal, unbroken, the glory of iron personified. Upon shaking feet you rise. The front of your tunic is wet, for only now you realize that you have been weeping. As the masters approach, you raise trembling, scarred hands in absolute devotion. These grey, feeble, and emaciated limbs seem comically unworthy of the master before you. Is he reaching out for you? The master is raising his giant gauntleted hand. He is gesturing to you, calling you forward. Oh, glorious day, oh day of days, you have been... You don't feel the pain, nor do you hear the crack of your skull shattering or the wet thud of your body slamming against the adamantine bulkhead. But your vision remains brutally clear. You finally see the grim reality you had denied. You finally see the vast, unending darkness, the eternal abyss. Within its depths, titanic and unknowable beasts swim against the currents of unreality, their forms too vast and too terrible to fully comprehend. What you witness is horror, an eternal song of suffering and chaos. Oh, how wrong you were. Traitor Astartes, despite their incredible post-human nature, are fundamentally reliant upon hosts of mortal crew to sustain their wars, raids, and other less martial pursuits. It's a bold claim, I know, especially after that little short story there, but it remains an undeniable truth. From its inception, the Emperor's grand vision for the Imperium was to forge a permanent and glorious civilization across the galaxy. A united human empire, free from the warp's influence and destined to outlast even the ancient empires of the Eldari and the Necron. And make no mistake, this Imperium was envisioned as a human civilization, not a post-human one. This distinction, while trivial to some, holds incredible significance and even became a deeply contentious issue for roughly half of the Primarchs and their legions towards the end of the Great Crusade. There's an ancient anonymous Greek proverb that suggests that society grows great when old men plant trees for whose shade they know they shall never sit. This philosophy, the idea of constructing a future not for oneself but for those deemed lesser, is one that proved uncomfortable for many of the Primarchs and their sons. For why should these near-divine beings, demigods in all but name, surrender their mantle of authority and report to mere baseline humans at Crusade's end? Creatures lesser in intellect, strength, and doomed by their mortality. It is quite ironic then, for Horus and his band of traitors, that the monumental achievements of the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade were not solely the result of superhuman prowess. Instead, they were achieved through the combined efforts of the vast, often overlooked masses of ordinary humanity. Every victory celebrated, every world conquered or brought to compliance owed as much to the unheralded toil and sacrifice of baseline humans as they did to the might of the Astartes. Mortal human subordinates, serfs, menials, labourers, auxiliaries and the like, though they may not always stand shoulder to shoulder with their post-human masters in battle, nor influence the grand strategies or tactical decisions that often guide their lives, remain absolutely critical to the functioning of any traitor legion, chapter, or warband. These men and women, often overlooked, undervalued, and ignored, may never gain the respect or recognition of their masters, nor will they live a life free from the constant threat of torture, death, or worse, for real or imagined infractions. Yet, it is precisely their unseen labour that enables the traitor legions to carry out their dark agendas effectively. Without this critical support network labouring tirelessly behind the scenes, even the most sane and effective of the traitors would find their effectiveness in war significantly reduced. For who else would shoulder the burden of maintaining the engines of war for the traitors? Who else would guide their great and ancient fleets, or tend to the enormous arsenals that arm these traitors? Who else would manage the incredible logistical demands that the long war against the Imperium necessitates? Who, if not the masses of mortal crew, unacknowledged and seemingly inexhaustible in their number, would work tirelessly to build the earthworks, walls, and roads under the whips and barrels of their masters in the most brutal of conditions? Who else would march into the open maw of enemy weapons fire solely to eat up as much of the enemy's ammunition as possible? And who else, willingly or unwillingly, provides fuel for the dark gods and the rituals performed in their names? It is the humans, those sad, lost, insane, or forgotten souls who form the nameless backbone of the traitor legions. Their lives, spent in unending cycles of pain, service, and exploitation, are expended without a second thought. They are the unsung labourers who keep the traitors' war machines running, who manage the complex logistics needed for campaigns across the galaxy, and who sustain the daily operations of their host legions in ways their masters will never fully recognise or acknowledge. But how did this come to be the case for the traitors? Well, as with many things, it traces back to the heresy. But this is not to imply that the concept of mortals being expendable was a novelty introduced during the heresy. Far from it, the notion of post-human superiority had been a complex and evolving issue well before the onset of the heresy, stretching back to the days of the Great Crusade and Unification Wars. Rather, what I meant to emphasize is that the heresy acted as a catalyst for the erosion of legion identity and discipline. As the heresy intensified, the legions became increasingly seduced by the intoxicating allure of the warp and the entities that lie within. The once stringent adherence to military discipline and the practicalities of war began to deteriorate among the traitors. Roles that were once diligently executed or overseen directly by Astartes were gradually neglected as their focus shifted more toward personal glory, service to the dark gods, or other petty and otherworldly pursuits. The void left by these neglected duties forced the mortals to step into roles of increasingly vital importance. The legions, or those exalted by their newfound gods, therefore found themselves preoccupied with pursuits far removed from the perceived trivialities of mundane warfare. For why would the magnificent warriors of the Emperor's children waste precious moments on logistical matters when they could instead indulge in the ecstatic decadence of their endless orgies? Why would the World Eaters bother with the tedium of command and control when the battlefield offered them the chance to build their god the throne of skulls that he oh so rightly deserves? It is beneath such beings to engage in anything so ordinary. Thus the serfs, in their silent, unseen multitudes, keep the traitor legions afloat. Their roles, elevated by necessity, but still overshadowed by the incredible exploits of their legion masters, are the uncelebrated pillars upon which much of the fate of the entire traitorous campaign rests. Despite their intelligence, speed, power, and all the other skills bestowed upon them by the Emperor and the gods they now pledge themselves to, the traitors still depend upon the most humble of foundations to survive. But to adopt another perspective, consider that for the average serf within the traitor legions, life might not have changed that significantly from the pre-heresy era through to the heresy and into the post-heresy period. For most of the human crew and support staff accompanying the legions on their campaigns, life is confined to the bowels of the massive vessels they call home. For the low-ranking members of a legion's human workforce, the complex strategies and elaborate schemes of their superhuman commanders are miles removed from their daily realities, both literally and figuratively. For the thousands upon thousands of souls living in the depths of these legion ships, any morsel of information about their overarching campaign or any other significant strategic development trickles down slowly, filtered through successive layers of command and passed on with one hushed whisper to another. By the time such news does filter down, it's often stale, the original decisions and developments aged and distorted by the long and disjointed chain of command and transmission. Months or years might pass before the effects of decisions made by their masters on the bridge or within one of the many stratagems on board reaches them. For these individuals, life is defined by the immediate demands of their duties, the relentless monotony of life in the void, and the endless cycle of menial tasks that keep their master's ship operational and ready for war. In this context, the ideological shifts and the corruption that saturated half of the Emperor's legions during the heresy might seem like distant echoes rather than pressing realities for the average serf. While the Astartes waged wars of unspeakable intensity and horror, bartering their souls in dark pacts to the ruinous powers of the warp, many serfs would just continue to weld bulkheads, repair faulty wiring, monitor communication networks, calibrate sensor arrays, maintain and inspect life support systems, completely oblivious of the newly pledged loyalty of their masters. For many average serfs and menials, war in 40k is quite abstract. It is a storm that rages on a plane of existence so far removed from their own daily monotony that it barely disturbs the true nature of their life spent in service to the Legion. Yet, life for the serfs among the traitor legions is not solely defined by relentless toil and the harsh demands of military service. Deep within the Legion ships, surprisingly vibrant if unconventional communities still manage to persist and sometimes even thrive. Far removed from the decks patrolled by those of the Legion themselves, these hidden pockets of humanity form their own little complex societies, complete with all the facilities and amenities that one may need. There would be marketplaces, gambling dens, makeshift chapels and altars, theatres, hairdressers, restaurants, warehouses and the like. Here, living amidst the bones of the ship, old men huddle around tattered boards, their minds locked in strategic battles of regicide while children duel with makeshift swords around them, darting through the dark corridors in games of war or hide and seek. Young couples steal moments of romance in forgotten alcoves within forgotten rooms, whose original purposes have long since faded from memory. families still gather, sharing stories by the glow of a makeshift fire as they prepare a meal from the rodents they caught earlier in that ship's rotation. Here, their lives, and often those of their multi-generational families, unfold largely unnoticed and unremarked upon by those they serve. Yet, the very obscurity that keeps these humans hidden from the eyes of their betters also denies them of any real protection. The lower decks of void ships, rarely patrolled and poorly secured, are one of the favoured hunting grounds for the horrors of the warp. Demons that tear through the thin veil of real space to stalk and prey upon the forgotten and the defenceless. The constant proximity of these mortal souls to regions corrupted by the warp or their passages through its depths drastically increases their exposure to its influence. As they live and serve near or within these regions, the energies of the warp that seethe just beyond the ship's hull may just seep through the thin barriers of their poorly maintained and often faulty Gellerfield, threatening to warp both flesh and mind and wreaking havoc upon the innocent, the unexpecting, or the deluded. However, the plight of serfs within the Traitor legions does indeed vary and can be shaped largely by the whims and principles of their host legions. For those bound to the Night Lords, existence is shrouded in near constant gloom, a suffocating, shadow-laden existence that is scarcely relieved by the feeble glow of handheld lumens, authorized only when their masters are absent. And with the return of their masters comes the return of total darkness, a darkness in which the serfs may find themselves the prey in random and merciless hunts, a grim sport enjoyed by their cruel masters. Serfs of the Iron Warriors will find themselves to be nothing more than cogs in the grand machine of war. Their value is measured solely by their utility, be it in reproduction, resource generation, maintenance, or as mere cannon fodder. The moment they falter or fail to be useful, they are ruthlessly discarded, their lives expended far more callously than ammunition. Those unfortunate enough to serve the Death Guard can expect to be used as living petri dishes for the concoction of new and exotic plagues or pathogens. They are not just servants, they are experiments. Life amid the Death Guard is a steady descent into decay, the air itself a thick fog of disease. Every breath is heavy with the risk of succumbing to some new horrific infection, making each unfiltered breath a gamble with the most horrific of stakes. On the other hand, those serving the Alpha Legion might experience a not so terrible life, as the Alpha Legion often integrate human operatives into their grand schemes, treating them with a rare measure of respect and providing opportunities available to very few others. There are even cases where Alpha Legionnaires have gone to great lengths, even risking their own lives, to extract their human agents from bad situations. A testament to the significant investment and value they place in these humans. Or, perhaps, as a strategy to ensure that none of their closely guarded secrets are ever compromised. Still, no matter the legion to which they are bound, serfs share a common fate should they ever encounter the loyal defenders of the Imperium. In the eyes of the loyalist forces, these serfs are heretics either by association or proximity, absolutely doomed in any boarding action or skirmish. For them, capture means brutal interrogation ever followed by execution. Only those with skills highly prized amongst the legions, like specialists or skilled legion artificers, might have some hope that they hold enough value to be pressed into service with the Inquisition or a penal legion. You might have noticed that the focus of this video has very much been on those serfs, menials, and other human servants bound to the Traitor legions, and the life they live aboard their void ships specifically. And you may ask yourself, why? Yes, if we were to widen our focus beyond the decks and corridors of void ships, the scope of human involvement in the Traitor legions increases exponentially. The roles of serfs and menials within the traitor legions are incredibly diverse and are not necessarily confined solely to shipboard life. Think of the fate of slaves used by the Iron Warriors, repurposed as human mine detectors on brutal battlefronts. Imagine the sight of a baseline human crucified to the hull of a Reaver Titan as it burns down a city. A sacrificial offering by the word-bearers to empower the demon within that hulking engine of war. There are countless ways in which humans contribute to the rusted war machine of the traitor legions. Their stories, often eclipsed by the towering presence of the Astartes, are crucial for fully grasping the breadth of savagery and exploitation that underpins the campaigns of the traitor legions. However, for the sake of time and clarity, I have chosen to focus on the life of these individuals as intimately tied to the void operations of the legions. A representation most reflective of what I think to be the typical experience of a traitor legion serf. Anyway, thanks for watching. Dystopian Chimp, out.